Could we see a huge trade between the Vancouver Canucks and the Boston Bruins? It sure sounds like the Bruins have big interest in Bo Horvat. Plus, could they also move goalie Thatcher Demko? And where are some possible destinations that might be happening to? Plus, we also have some trade talk around the San Jose Sharks and the St. Louis Blues. We also have an update on Dylan Larkin's contract in Detroit, a waiver claim, and a bunch of injuries and prospect news. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot to cover here today. Let's start with another NHL waiver claim. Yesterday, the Vancouver Canucks had placed forward Lane Pedersen on waivers, and he was picked up today. We found out he's now heading to be a member of the Columbus Blue Jackets. It was kind of an interesting time in Vancouver, as it's really been a lot of interesting days around that team here recently and for the last number of weeks and months. But yeah, in practice yesterday, before he was put on waivers, Rick Tocchet had him practicing on the top line. Looked like he was going to get a chance to play a higher role. Found out he was on waivers. Tocchet himself even seemed surprised by the motion. Made it sound like it could just be a paper transaction. Not expecting him to get picked up, but he indeed was. So he's off to be a member of the Jackets for right now. Of course, Lane Pedersen ended up going to Vancouver when they made the trade earlier this year with the Carolina Hurricanes for Ethan Bear. He went along with Bear from Carolina to Vancouver. He's appeared in 11 games at the NHL level for Vancouver this year, putting up 3 points, but has had a really solid run in the American Hockey League with 24 points in 18 games. To me, it almost seems like he's kind of a fringe player. It's not like he can't be replaced, but he was starting to make progress and do well, and he was certainly helping their AHL affiliate out quite well, and I think deserved a chance to stay up a little bit longer with everything going on in Vancouver. But the time and experiment in Canucks organization has come to a close. He'll now go to Columbus and see what he can do. We also have a variety of injury updates today, including news from Ilya Mikeyev in Vancouver, staying with the Canucks for another moment, that he's done for the season. They announced it late last night after their game that Mikeyev has a torn ACL. He's been playing through it for the entire season. It sounds like it happened, I think it was either in training camp or right at the beginning of the year, and he's now decided that it's getting too much and he should be shut down and have the surgery. Ultimately, I think if the Canucks were in a better spot in the standings and they were pushing for playoffs, if they thought they had a legitimate chance to make playoffs and do some damage, he'd probably try to keep playing through it. He was told by doctors that it wasn't going to get any worse by waiting if he was able to play through it. I also seen that Mikeyev felt the need to go on to Twitter today and post a long thread basically confirming that this was totally his decision. I assume there must have been a major backlash and a bunch of negative talk about the Canucks organization and how they handled this, because it's not like it's a case where he just got hurt and needs surgery like it's been for some time now. But, I know the Canucks were certainly getting some flack for how some other stuff was being handled, like the Tanner Pearson situation. And I understand some people, don't really give them the benefit of the doubt when they've had other wrongdoings or what appears to be wrongdoings. I should be careful what I say because we don't know that they've had any wrongdoings with Tanner Pearson. But I know there's some that feel that there was. There's certainly some stuff being looked into and all that. And, I understand reputation-wise why, except people might not give them the benefit of the doubt. But Mikeyev and his agent, Dan Milstein, have both gone public to say that this was completely their decision. Like, Mikeyev was well aware of what he was dealing with. Not only did he deal with Canucks doctors, but he sought out other doctors, had second, third opinions, seen specialists and all that. And they just decided that with the Canucks where they are with the season, it didn't make sense to keep trying to play through it. And if he has the surgery now, that he can be recovered with enough time to be able to still train in the summertime and be ready for training camp next year. Whereas, if he waits till the end of the season, he's going to miss a big chunk of next year. And of course, they're hoping that next year is going to be better and more meaningful. So certainly Mikeyev was a free agent signing in Vancouver, having a pretty solid start to his season, especially now that we know what he was dealing with health-wise. I think he'll be a good fit there and hopefully can get back strong. But it certainly makes sense now after watching him play. I kind of was thinking he didn't look to be as fast as he used to be in Toronto. Makes a lot of sense why he probably wasn't, given what he's dealing with. So we also seen Flyers forward Zach McEwen is going to be out for approximately 5 weeks. He had to have surgery on his jaw, and it's believed that came from the fights that took place with the Minnesota Wild not too long ago. So obviously that's an unfortunate situation for him, but obviously he'll be able to make it back for the end of the year. But the Flyers, again, they're not sitting in a playoff spot. They're near the bottom of the standing, so certainly not too big a deal that way. Some other players and prospects going back to the minors, and we also have an emergency recall coming from junior, which is odd and unusual, but the Rangers sent back Will Coley back to the American Hockey League after getting a couple of NHL games under his belt. The Flames have also sent back Jacob Pelche, Dennis Gilbert, as well as Dufour. They're all going back to American Hockey League. Some of these two are because of schedules. Obviously, they want their prospects to play as much as possible. Some of them have some days off here coming up, so this makes sense to get them back down there. But in stranger situations, which is not something you see much, the Montreal Canadiens have recalled prospect Owen Beck from the Ontario Hockey League on an emergency basis. They already have some emergency recalls from their farm team, the American Hockey League in Laval. They're dealing with obviously a lot of injuries. They have a lot of veterans out right now. So I'm not sure how this is going to go, but Beck is definitely getting into the lineup tonight. He'll wear number 62 and debut as they do battle against the Ottawa Senators in Canada tonight at the Canadian Tire Center. So Beck, this is a situation where he actually ended up in a similar boat with Team Canada. He was one of the last cuts for Team Canada for the World Junior Championships. They run into injuries, and then as they approach the playoffs in the World Junior Championships, that he got recalled again and got to go, and he actually got to dress and be in a couple games there. So, Beck is kind of used to this in a sense, but I'm not sure how long he'll be up. I would suspect not too long, but, not something you see very often, a prospect getting recalled from junior, because there has to be certain criteria met, and they have to already have other emergency recalls from their American Hockey League team, and it's not an easy thing to actually qualify to do. So, be interesting to see how Beck makes out tonight against Ottawa. Another update as well regarding Dylan Larkin and the Red Wings. There's been some trade talk around him. Detroit media, including Answer Khan, who covers the Red Wings for MLive.com, does not see a trade being very likely, but we haven't really heard much around the contract and what might be holding things up. He did have some latest details in a recent article talking about how Larkin appears to be looking for something in the $9 million range, and the Red Wings are more comfortable closer to the $8 million range. So obviously that's a big gap. $1 million apart is something that's significant when it comes to NHL contract negotiations. We've also seen a case before where sometimes that can be difficult to bridge, and sometimes it can lead to a parting of ways via trade or via free agency. But at this point, I think it's a little early. I'm sure Yzerman is probably going to want to negotiate plenty with Larkin in his camp ahead of the deadline to have a better idea where things are at. But there's a chance that even if he's not signed, that he may not be dealt. Obviously, the market has changed a bit since they first started negotiating, which has obviously, changed what Larkin's ask would be. For sure, there's no doubt about that. Of course, he's the captain of the team, a very important piece there. I think losing Larkin would set them back, and certainly, this rebuild is starting to make strides this year. They obviously, like the Senators, have a ways to go before they can get closer to being a playoff bound. But, it would be a mistake to lose him, obviously. It'd have to be a heck of a haul coming back. Now, I've heard some rumblings before that, and I believe we've talked about it here too on the channel, just saying that there's a chance that Yzerman could trade Larkin and then in turn get Horvat from Vancouver. I'm like, well, if he's not going to pay Larkin that kind of money, do you think he's going to want to pay Horvat that kind of money? I mean, really, why wouldn't he keep his own guy that they know and are more familiar with and get the deal done? Because they're probably looking for similar type contracts, slight difference in age between the two players, but obviously, this doesn't make sense to me why they would make that kind of move. Like I said, I can't see him offering Horvat the money that Larkin is looking for if they're not willing to give it to him. So certainly we'll have to see where things go, but $1 million apart is where they stand now. Now his teammate Tyler Bertuzzi also needs a contract. There is, I think, a greater chance that he gets traded. Again, hard to say, if it happens or not. I think Yzerman is a little bit more willing to move him than Larkin, of course. I think they see him as a much more important long-term piece, but we'll have to see where that goes. If negotiations don't go well and he's not signed, I think there's a greater chance we could see a Bertuzzi trade more so than a Larkin trade. Now, on a few other trade rumors around the NHL, a couple of things to keep an eye on in Vegas. We know the Golden Knights are likely going to be wanting to add ahead of the playoffs. The Vegas Golden Knights are going through a little bit of a tough skid right now, but certainly should be a playoff team by all things manageable here. But, it's far from being secured. Still lots of hockey left to go. But there has been some reports as well that one of the players that they may be interested in as a potential depth player, bottom six player, would be St. Louis Blues forward Noel Acciari, who, of course, Bruce Cassidy would know well from both their times being in the Boston Bruins organization. So certainly, a player in the Blues organization is expected to be traded if there's a market for him, and I imagine there would be. Of course, we hear a lot when it comes to St. Louis about, O'Reilly and Tarasenko and, maybe some other guys as well. But certainly a player like Acciari could have a market and could generate some interest too. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. The San Jose Sharks, of course, when we hear about them, we mainly hear about Timo Meier getting tons of attention and Erik Karlsson. But another player to watch that's likely going to get dealt is Kevin Labanc. Labanc's making $4.725 million for this year and one more. He's having a decent year, 25 points in 45 games, but it is believed that various reports from Sharks media that he is available for trade. I've seen some reports a while back saying it looked like there could be a bit of a disconnect, just not a good vibe between he and coach David Quinn. That maybe, sometimes players and coaches just don't see things the same way, and there's not a good fit under the systems they like to play and things like that. And that could be a case of one of these being the situation here with Labanc. I mean, obviously, he has a career high 56 points. I think at that point, the Sharks were a stronger team. He was playing with stronger players. It looked like his trajectory was heading higher. I think they believed he could be a top 6 forward, be a little bit more productive. And things haven't quite panned out that way in San Jose, but I think the team has changed a lot as well. And I think that's affected him. But it's still another player that could be an interesting piece to watch for players. Teams looking to add players with middle 6 value. He doesn't come with a ton of term or a ton of money, and it could be an interesting piece to add on a variety of NHL playoff teams, heading towards the playoffs. Now, there's some rumblings as well. The Edmonton Oilers have interest in Flyers defenseman Ivan Provorov. Now, Provorov, of course, made headlines recently for the Pride Night and not wearing the jersey and all that. But at the end of the day, regardless of what your thoughts are in that situation, Ivan Provorov, I think, is ready for a fresh start into Philadelphia. And it sure sounds like reports we had seen a few weeks ago suggest that they're ready to move on from him as well and have a fresh start. Well, there's obviously the Edmonton Oilers, I think ideally, if they can make it work, would like to add up front and on the blue line. Similar scenario we've seen with Toronto. They're both structured very similarly in how the teams are built in that sense. Could be a good fit on the back end. They've, the right side of the blue line's a little bit more set in place right now. The left side is where they'd like to add, which Provorov could certainly help with. One piece that's been mentioned that would be offered to go the other way would be Jesse Puljujarvi. There's no way that the Flyers take Puljujarvi straight up for Provorov. That's a given. We know that. I don't know what else the Edmonton Oilers would have to throw in there to make things interesting. We're probably looking at, some prospects and picks to go along with it. But certainly Puljujarvi is another young player that might have a chance to get a fresh start, whether it be Philly or somewhere else, and see what he can make of his career and get things back on track in a better role. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. No guarantees that kind of deal happens. It does make sense to me to some extent that Provorov would generate interest in Edmonton. I just don't know what kind of trade package they'd have to throw together. We've seen Edmonton take on some other players that have kind of been labeled as controversial, and it's worked out just fine. Sometimes players just need to get in the right group, right media, and to kind of make it all kind of go away. I mean, Evander Kane has worked out quite nicely. Hasn't been a distraction to his teammates, and really for the most part sounds like he's fit in nicely with the team and community. And really, I don't think Provorov is really much of an issue. Yes, he's got some different beliefs on things, but at the same time, we can all disagree with them or not, but he is entitled to have those beliefs. And at the end of the day, I don't know if that's going to affect too much of a hockey locker room, but we'll have to see. But the Oilers reportedly have interest. We'll see if anything comes from that. And in Vancouver, of course, could we see a significant trade involving the Boston Bruins and Bo Horvat going that way? More reports today that it sounds like there could be of interest of Brandon Carlo maybe being dangled here by the Bruins to generate some interest for Horvat to come to Boston. One thing that I've seen suggested that the Boston Bruins should do, which was also reported anyway, was that if they're going to trade Carlo, they should try to get a defenseman back and trade maybe Luke Schenn. Of course, Luke Schenn comes with a lot of experience, a couple Stanley Cups to his name, a cheap contract, and not the same kind of defenseman exactly as Carlo, shoots the opposite way and all that, but still another veteran blue liner who could at least help for this season for sure. Obviously, there would have to be more involved, than just Carlo, but he would be a big starting point for Boston if they're willing to put him in the deal. I do wonder if they would include a prospect like Fabian Lysell. Would they include a first-round pick? I'm not sure that there's other assets like that and prospects that they might be willing to possibly dangle there, but Horvat to Boston for Carlo does make some sense. If you think about it from a cap perspective, I mean, Carlo's making a little bit over $4 million. Horvat's at $5.5. They would probably have to include another player or move him in a separate deal. But we know the Bruins for some time have contemplated moving, Craig Smith. They have some players in the minors that have some salary that's still affecting their cap, like a Mike Riley, for example. The difference between Horvat and Carlo's contract is about $1.4 million. You throw in Luke Shen, so you're around $2.5 million or so that you'd have to move out on top of the Carlo contract. A lot of the players we've talked about there, whether it be Smith or some of the ones that have been buried, they could certainly fill that need. It wouldn't be that difficult from a cap perspective for Boston to figure this out. It just really boils down to if the Canucks are going to be the suitable trading partner here for Horvat to Boston, and it depends on what else other teams are offering. There's lots of interest around this player in Bo Horvat. I mean, he's a good leader with lots of goal-scoring ability, and I think lots of teams are going to be showing interest. I know teams that you would expect to be involved in some capacity would be Colorado. There's no secret there. They're looking for a centerman. I think a team like the Devils, for example, are more interested in a winger like Timo Meier. I wouldn't suspect they would be a player in those services as well. Teams like the New York Rangers and other teams around the Eastern Conference, I don't really know that it makes a ton of sense for them. You hear the Leafs seem to be connected to everybody. I personally think they'd be looking more for a winger as well if they do want to add in a forward group. I think the Leafs in a perfect world, like some of these other teams, would like to add a forward and a defenseman. I'm not sure that they're going to want to add a forward that's that high profile. It'd be complicated for them to pull off from a cap perspective, and I don't know that they could really do that. I mean, I guess they could probably do it. It's just a matter of, are they going to add in one area and deplete themselves in another is the big question. So certainly we'll have to see where things go, but the Canucks-Bruins trade is not out of the question here. There's a lot of pieces in there that kind of make sense for both sides. Be curious to see if they can get this to materialize, or if he ends up going somewhere else. And of course, we also have been hearing more and more about Thatcher Demko. Demko's not a given he gets traded by the deadline. That's something that could end up waiting, as Elliot Friedman's reported a few times. He's, surprised he's even saying his name is out there, but it has been out there, and it is picking up. I've heard Rick Dhaliwal mention it, even on their Canucks program as well. Dhaliwal is very well connected, seems to have a lot of the latest intel and be accurate on Canucks speculation. And he mentioned teams like Pittsburgh, Buffalo, and Columbus being interested in Demko, that they apparently have been getting some calls on him, because, I think it's no secret around the NHL that the Canucks are wide open for business. Several players could be made available, and just a matter of finding the right fit with the right price tag. I think a Demko trade is going to demand a good return. He's 27 years old. He comes with term. The dollar value on his contract's not crazy. Once, he formerly played like an all-star. I really think that there's a lot of teams that would line up for this guy. And like Dhaliwal said, I can certainly see them doing it, but they better get a good haul in return to set themselves up for the future, because he's a big piece that they would no longer have. So let me know your thoughts on all of the rumors and news from today down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.